Big question for you. What percentage of the British population do you think is considered as overweight or obese? Have a guess. I'm going to give you a few seconds to guess. What if I told you, sorry, I lied. I only give you 1 second. What if I told you 62.8% of British adults, I'm not talking about childhood obesity, I'm just talking about adults, 62.8% of British adults are considered as overweight or obese? In this episode of Harun Rabbani podcast, I am, of course, sharing the platform with my colleague and dear friend, Dr. Ashish Paul. And what we're going to do is we're going to dive deep into obesity and 5 strategies, natural ways to deal with it. But before that, let's share with some more statistics. So obesity itself in the UK, now obviously, say for example, in the US, the numbers are much higher. No two ways about it. In the UK, obesity rates, just obesity on their own, it's 27.8%. This is across the board. But it doesn't just stop there, because your genetics plays a big role in this case. If, for example, you are somewhere from China, Japan, they say the class is Chinese, it's not obviously Chinese, but Far East Asian, probably got the lowest obesity rates or weight gain rates, overweight rates. So compared to the UK, which is UK national population of 62.8%, it's approximately 33% for the Chinese community. But the opposite extent is if you are somebody who is African or Caribbean, basically black, there is a 67% chance of being obese. Asians don't fare that well, it's 59%, and the traditional, meaning white English people, approximately 63%. So the numbers are absolutely scary. They're very high.
Yeah.
And like I said, a lot of countries are a lot higher. So Ashish, as a doctor, what are you seeing with people with obesity issues?
As I, read even your post. Good evening, Harun. As
Good
even
evening.
I read your post earlier on that you shared on Facebook, it's just scary to look at. And of course, I know some of the stats being a practitioner, but even what you see around you and the people that we see in the family or as a practitioner, the implications or the effects of obesity on number of other health diseases or health issues that people come up with. And that is just to say that it just scares me. Where are we heading towards with this whole thing? And not just for us, but for children, for women, for women's health issues. As we know, I'm going to obviously talk about my area of expertise. PCOS is more linked to when you have diabetes in the family. So there is a very strong genetic link there. Genes is not everything, though, by the way. You can change genetic expression. We know epigenetics talks about that. And it's a lot how you live your life. But it is scary to look at those numbers and to think, what are we doing about it? Why is obesity so high?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously bad news and good news, and we're here to tell you good news. But I want to share with you some further statistics, actually. So, US is not the worst place in the world for obesity, by the way. The worst place, number one, is a place called, and I've got it written down here, I've never even heard of it, a place called Nauru, and I think it's one of the Polynesian islands, which the obesity rates, I'm not talking about overweight, I'm talking about obesity. So overweight is higher. 61% compared to British 27%. So good news for the British compared to Nauru. Second is the Cook Islands, and the Cook Islands is 55.9%. And lowest, which absolutely shocked me, is Vietnam, obesity rates of 2.1%. Second lowest is my country of birth, Bangladesh. So if you're currently living in Bangladesh, the chances of obesity are approximately 3.6%. So I'm not saying everyone should move to Bangladesh. That's not a good idea. It's already overpopulated. But clearly there's something going on in those countries versus the one with high obesity rates. So in terms of causes, a number of causes. You mentioned they're not genetic, of course. PCOS. We won't talk about strategies, but let's
Yeah.
just cover a few. PCOS, obviously for women, which is polycystic ovary syndrome. Something called, I hadn't heard of this, called Prader-Willi syndrome, which is a genetic condition where the person is constantly hungry. Then there's the Cushing syndrome, which
Yeah.
basically means that they're constantly stressed. So they're releasing high levels of cholesterol,
Cortisol.
not cholesterol, cortisol, I should say.
Yeah.
And hypothyroidism, that means your thyroid isn't working as effectively,
Yeah.
and also osteoarthritis. So are there any other conditions or anything that stands out for you as a cause, in terms of those things that I mentioned?
Because of the obesity.
Yeah. What is
Because
causing
of,
obesity?
yeah, so there will be few more. Obesity is going to cause an issue on your on your digestion. You're more likely to be constipated actually if you're obese, because one is that you're not moving enough. So that is another thing. So what else? We also have, you mentioned thyroid. So we have
Mm,
hypothyroid, which
mm,
is again linked with digestive system as well. People will not be able to breathe very well if they are obese. So lung capacity gets compromised when you have so much body weight around you. And other organs, we know that the gaseous exchange, this is more cellular stuff, at the level of organs does not happen very well when body has got so much fat on it. So
mm.
there is all these, and of course you mentioned the joints. There will be actual weight on the joints, and then people will have ankle issues, knee issues, and even the hip issues. So mobility is an issue. Yeah. So all these issues, yes, in addition to what you have mentioned, Harun.
And I was talking to a friend earlier on, and he's morbidly obese, and I won't mention names, of course. And he just said he hasn't been doing his exercises, stretching it, basically yoga exercises, for months, and he just did it now, and he caused a trapped nerve. Of course, you're going to cause
Yep.
yourself injury if it's not persistent. So one one myth I want to just knock on its head now is this. Let's say now I'm not obese, so I can't say I know how it feels. However, genetics. If you look, so my mother's brother, he's obese. His wife's obese. A few of their family members are obese. Amongst my mother's family, there's nobody with obesity. But let's say my mother and my father, they were both obese and their ancestors were obese. Is it a genetic condition that I am going to inherit straight away? Well, let me give you a bit of a wake up call. If they are eating 3, 4 times a day and their food is full of sugar, processed food, and they eat in excess amounts. I'm now describing my uncle and his wife. Love them dearly, by the way. I'm not having a go at them. Hi, uncle and wife in New York. But anyway, if my parents are eating excess amounts and they're eating foods that are inflammatory, foods that are fattening, and then I adopt the same habits as my parents,
Yeah.
am I going to, and my parents are fat, am I going to get fat? Well, Ashish, am I? Or if I perhaps take a different approach and say, what, I'm going to take responsibility.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is a lot of people blame the genetics as the reason why they have obesity. And sure, there's a number of potential conditions, and it's very low, by the way. There's a number of potential conditions which can predispose you to being obese. And even if they do, even if you've got genetic conditions, more often than not, you can do something about it. So a lot of
Yeah.
people, well, actually, let's do this. In Ayurveda, which is ancient medicine that goes back, is it 4,000 years or more than that?
Yeah. It goes back forever, but yeah,
Yeah.
I would say about 5,000 years.
5,000 years. So this has been practiced in India with obviously millions of people over 5,000 years. So it is natural medicine. Now, it talks about different constitutions. I want to explore that before we go any further. But before we go any further, if you're watching on any of the live platforms, make sure you say hello. Make sure you type in if you have any questions or any comments you've got, and let's make it interactive. That's the whole point of doing it live. The other point is I don't have to edit. But anyway, that's a big point actually. But the whole point of going live is to actually get your interaction. So talk to us about the three constitutions that everybody needs to be aware of.
Yes, I think blaming anyone, either your parents or anybody else or your circumstances, is not a good idea. It is about owning it, taking responsibility. Up until you are 14, 15 years old, yes, certain habits which you learn with your parents or in your families, sometimes you don't have a control over those. But when you do become conscious of them, then what can you do about it? That's where the constitution or the body constitution or the personality types come into place, where you can learn about that. Why am I looking like this? Yeah. Why am I heavier? Or that I cannot run very well? Because children who are getting more into obese category, they must be thinking, why am I like this? Yeah. And for them to then go into learn about what is my body type, which we call personality type in Ayurveda. We have three types: Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and then the combination of Vata, Pitta, Pitta, Kapha, Vata, Kapha.
So I'm going to slow you down because people who don't know Vata, Pitta, Kapha, Vata, Pitta,
Yes,
Kapha, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Go ahead.
that's right. Yeah. So Vata is, all these personalities, they have characteristics. And if you, it's like knowing your skin. If you know your skin is dry, you will put more moisturizer on. If you know your skin is more oily, you treat it accordingly. So if you know that your body is certain type, your mind behaves in a certain way, then eating foods accordingly, doing your lifestyle accordingly, you know what time to eat, what kinds of food, what kinds of food combinations to eat. That is the way forward for you to knowing about your body and mind type. And that's where personality type, I think it should be taught to everyone in schools. You just gave a presentation to youngsters, right? Just imagine if they all know about their body type.
Yeah.
Yeah. That will be a game changer for them, to know that this food is actually not good for me, and then to learn that, because body constitution takes a while for you to really understand who you are. But if they know that, okay, I cannot have that many potatoes at night, so I will be having these many potatoes at lunchtime and not at nighttime. And just by switching that, you can change the whole genetic expression.
So does that mean then that different people digest food better at different times, different constitutions?
Absolutely. Different
So
times, different ways.
right, and different seasons as well.
Yeah, different. See,
Because right,
everything comes into play. Yeah, that's the
okay.
beauty of it. That's where it becomes subjective.
So the kapha people, are they the ones who have more tendency towards obesity, or can any three of the constitutions have it?
Well, if you are eating excessively, anybody will become obese. But yes, kapha, because they have more tendency to sit down. They like more sweet carbohydrate type foods, and they're not exercising very well. Their digestion is slower, so they have more tendency to put on weight. So they need to know, for example, if someone is kapha type, if they know right from early on their age that this is my type, I need to, if I've eaten some heavy meal, then I need to go and work it out, or I need to walk it off. That is where this consciousness, this natural learning comes into play, which it becomes, it helps you. And also everybody, the way they digest, vata digest differently, pitta digest differently, kapha digest differently. So you need to know how your body is behaving.
Right. Okay. So this is something that perhaps we'll do an entire episode on each one of them in the future. But for
We have a lot
for
of
the sake of that,
episodes to
I
do.
know, we have to, because I mean, look, guys, the reality is that, and we're going to come on to that in a bit, but the reality is we end up beating ourselves up. So me, since childhood, I used to be skinny. I was like skinny, skinny, skinny. And I used to have the mick taken out of me, like really bullied, including by family members. And then in martial arts, it was better in martial arts because I still kicked people's butt despite my weight. That the point was, I was getting paranoid that I'm
Yeah.
not good enough. And so you might think, people talk about the mind-body connection. There is no connection, it's one.
It's
There
all
is no
one.
mind separation between spirit. There's one. This is why yoga is about unification of mind, body, and spirit. And so, okay, so we understand that there's three different types.
Yeah.
Just briefly, if you were to summarize the three types, what's a Vata person? Just a 2-3 sentence summary of what a
So
Vata person.
you are a good example of Vata, right? Vata
Okay,
person who is slender, skinnier, out of the whole family, they'll be the one who'll have the least weight. They're lighter.
right.
They think quickly, they eat quickly, they talk quickly, they're erratic because of that. They are innovators. They like to do new things. So they hate sitting in one place. Those are Vata. Pitta is more passionate people. Fiery, they are task oriented. They want to do something and then they will make sure that it is finished. They can eat, they have really good appetite and they can eat very well and digest very well. And Kapha, I already mentioned, that how they are.
So Kapha people tend to also be more, not just sedentary, but they also tend to be more feeling people, kinesthetic type of people, would you say?
Yes, they are more gentle, softer, mushy,
Mushy.
mushy. They are cute that way, but then they
Mm,
do have tendency to be stagnant because they don't like changing. Yeah. So they
right.
don't like changing in every way. They don't like changing relationships, jobs, or foods, or habits. That is why
Oh,
they are more prone to.
oh, oh, that's a major important one. So a Kapha person is less likely to change, which is interesting because with the work that I do with people with type 2 diabetes, a lot of them are overweight or obese,
Yeah.
and change is a challenge for them. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
And then it'll be temporary, where they'll do Weight Watchers or something. And some people get success, but generally a lot of them, they'll join it, they'll lose a bit of weight and then regain it back. Talk to me about reaction. So strategy one is to understand your constitution.
Yeah.
Who are you naturally? You are not and you have very combinations, I presume. You're not
Yeah.
just
You
kapha.
have combinations. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So combination of kapha, pitta, and vata, and so there's some level of uniqueness there. Understand your type, because
Yeah.
if you're a vata person, then your behavior will be very different to a kapha person. I know a little bit about it but you're the Ayurvedic doctor, so I won't even pretend to embarrass. I won't even embarrass myself. So strategy number two. Let's go on to that, which is food reactions. Why is that important in terms of managing or reducing your weight?
Food reactions or food combinations are spoken about a lot in natural medicine. In Ayurvedic medicine, is what combinations of food you should be eating. We now know that carbohydrates and proteins, and we know from modern perspective of nutrition. But Ayurveda talks about, for example, you never mix milk and fruit. Yeah, so people who are making smoothies in milk or milk and strawberries and all that, it's a bad combination for your gut, because it is not helping your gut to, it's going to make it more reactive. There will be more inflammation involved. So that, and then one of the things is we don't, in Ayurveda, we don't recommend you warm up honey. So you have honey always cool or in a cooler drink, not in a very, very hot drink. You don't warm or cook honey. Yeah. So similarly, other foods that you are taking, now we hear of all these gut allergies or gluten sensitivity and
Mm.
sensitivity to all sorts of other nuts. And, I hadn't heard of this until I moved to the UK. Because this is not something which was very common at least 24 years ago in India.
It
Um,
wasn't very common in the UK, by the way.
exactly. But it is
All the
more and more.
allergies. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that is also coming from because your gut is not settled, your gut is not inflammation free. And also, if there are a lot of factors to that, if you inherit that kind of gut, yeah, say from your parents, and also the things that happen during pregnancy and things that happen during childbirth, uh, or afterwards when a lot of younger kids are given antibiotics, then it really disrupts your gut uh, bacteria, as we know. And that can also trigger a lot of reactions later in life. So there are a lot of factors that can happen, which can make even simpler foods reactive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just eating a simple nut can make somebody having an anaphylactic shock. It's just shocking to see that. But it is coming from an inflammation. Either you developed it in your lifetime or you passed it on to your kids without
And,
knowing it.
and and it's important to understand inflammation is, and I'll keep it so basic. I'm a kickboxer. If you get punched in the face, in your eyes, you get a black eye, that's called inflammation. It's swollen up. And I know for those of you who understand, great, please bear with me on this one. So basically, it's a swelling up. And inflammation is important when you're being infected or bruised.
Yeah.
But when food is doing it to you constantly, continuously, it's called chronic inflammation. Several things. Number one, chronic inflammation is the underlying fundamental
Yeah.
cause of many, many diseases. Well, clearly, well, might not be clear to you. Chronic pain comes from chronic inflammation. If you don't have
Yeah.
inflammation, you don't have that pain. Not chronic pain is what are we talking about? So if you're obese, overweight, you're
Yeah.
gonna have back pain, shoulder pain, joint pain because you're inflamed. Your body is in fight or flight mode. That's the first thing. Second thing is inflammation is the cause, a major contributor, I should say, and one of the underlying causes of type 2 diabetes, one of the major underlying causes
Yeah.
of cancer. There's numerous other diseases. In fact, all chronic diseases seem to have chronic inflammation
Yeah.
as a ongoing factor. So reaction and how would people find out their reactivity to food if they haven't had, if, say, for example, they don't touch nuts and they eat normal, healthy diet, how would you know if that person is reactive to a certain type of food or other?
Well, their gut will tell them either they are constipated or their stomach will be looser, stools will be looser, stools will be more smellier, or the wind that they release or the farts will be smellier as well, which means that gut biosis is not happening well.
Right.
Then they will have skin rashes, skin which feels little itchier. There is nothing to see, but it just doesn't feel settled. Or people who get rosacea, for example, on the face, or they might. Some people have these thread veins that they can see, which is also a reaction. And also reaction in terms of their mind is not settled. They feel a little bit of crampy stomach, or some cramps
Mm.
from time to time. So they know that it's not 100%. They're okay with it, it's going on. But all these are little signs where it is coming from your gut. They need to notice that all of these signs, if they have any aches and pains, any joint pains, out of nowhere, these are
Mm.
signs of your gut being inflamed.
You know, so hello to Teresa, by the way, and John Boyce. Great to see you guys. Thank you for joining us. And but if you have any questions, you want to share anything, please put it forward. Now, just in case you're wondering, is Harun unwell? Because I keep going like this. It's actually because I'm sweating to death. I'm in a small room, and this time of night, I get the sunshine hitting me. It's really warm, but if I open the window, it's not noisy. I live in a village, but I'm trying to keep the noise out in case. But I'm sweating to death. That's why I'm just clearing myself
Okay.
constantly. So this is for our viewers, just in case. So I don't do illness. I haven't got time for it. So food reactions. A good example, actually, is interesting because my younger son, who's 20, he was having, you call it loose stools, diarrhea, and he he thinks he's living healthily. In our terms, he's not, and he's not sleeping well. And we're going to come back to that in a bit. And what's happened is that he couldn't figure out what it is, and it's affecting his hormones. So the first thing I said was, "Are you having dairy?" No, not much, but I have milkshakes at nighttime. And so the other day, a couple of weeks ago, he was telling me about that. And then the other day, he actually bothered to not, he actually stopped the milkshakes and so on and dairy for a while. And then he had a milkshake one night. Following day, after the races, he went, well, actually, he went to the toilet for diarrhea. So you can actually also discover by way, and Gandhi was famous for that, by way of keeping a diary and observing how you
Yeah.
react to certain foods. And that's very important. But again, I think it's very important. Like, say, for example, I love curry. John, who's a friend of mine, he knows I cook curry and he's had my hottest curry. But I've also got I think I've got a bit of bitter side. And in this hot weather, I sense it's not a good idea for me to have hot, spicy curries. What do you think?
Absolutely. You do have some pitta. So you need to be careful when the season is of pitta, which is warm summer that we have. And especially right now, it's quite warm in the UK. Then to eat food accordingly. And if you have eaten hot food, how to calm it down, to drink a lot of water afterwards, not with the food, but afterwards. And so that you can take that pitta away. You can flush it out of your system. Because if it is going to stay there, it will cause a reaction in terms of sweating, or you might find redness, you might find again itching is another sign. So all of these things are going on. If you are really conscious of your constitution or your personality type, it just makes it so much easier because you know how much to eat.
Yeah, absolutely. And so so that's number one. Is number two, sorry, is observe food reaction. But I
Yeah.
also want to, while we're on inflammation, I want to use my dad as an example. So he lives in the UK. He's a stressor. He thinks, he worries. He likes to worry a lot. He doesn't like to do. He just does it. And he was born in Bangladesh. And when he goes back, he stopped going out. But whenever he goes, well, when he's here, he often has IBS. And this is for the last 20 years or so. But what
Yeah.
I found was every time we went back to Bangladesh, despite living in the village in Bangladesh where the water isn't so clean and so on, everything goes out the window. He has no IBS, he has no
Yeah.
diarrhea problem. And there is nothing other than what's going inside in his head that's causing it. When he's over there, he's present, he's loving the weather, loving the food. Of course, there's amazing food there, it's fresh and so on. And so all the stresses go out the window. And it's the place of his birth. But I think also the reason I mention it is this: it's also in the way you eat food. Are you
There
somebody
is another
who's,
reason as well.
yeah, okay. Okay, you tell me and I'll come on to that reason. Go ahead.
So the other reason is that the microbes which are present in that environment where he was born. So whenever, whatever age he came with, those microbes, that's why ethnicity is so important, because those microbes, even after living here, generations, 2, 3 generations down the line, you still have those microbes. Okay. And that is why certain foods react to certain ethnicities. For example, Scotch bonnet, such a hot chili, and only certain ethnicities can eat it. Other people
Yeah.
will have a real strong reaction to it because your body, your genes are not used to eating that. So that is another reason for your father to feel good, because his microbes are used to those microbes
Yeah,
back in Bangladesh.
what's interesting is what people aren't aware of, and you need to watch the episode we did before this.
Yeah.
So, oh, Aftab, my friend Aftab says vitamin D as well in Bangladesh helps with the mood. Absolutely, 100% correct.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the natural, it's a sunlight, and so what was it saying? Aftab, by the way, is a friend of mine. We go back to childhood. We're talking about secondary school, and it's great to see
Okay.
him. And
Nice.
he's been heavily involved in charities and so on. So okay, so one of the things that people often do in today's society, and I really hope none of you guys watching do it, but if you do it, stop, is sitting at the couch and watching television. Or maybe sitting at the dinner table and you're listening to the news. What does that do to you? Even though with news, there's a war going on, inflation, etc. News is never good news, right? It's all talks about crap. All that stuff that's going on, and you're taking it, you're basically activating your stressor hormones. So what should be hugely pleasurable suddenly becomes extraordinarily stressful. So watching news or being distracted is one of the worst things. The best thing, I'm going to pass it over to Ashish. What's the best way somebody can eat?
Oh, wow. Well, there is a lot that goes into that. You got to be mindful. Ayurvedic way of eating is that you bless the food, you thank where the food has come from, whether you're eating vegetarian or meat diet, regardless, you bless the food and you thank wherever the food, if it came from an animal, you do that. You eat as a community, not just even as a family, because we actually used to live in small communities,
Mm.
in smaller groups. So everybody would sit down and share meal. Sharing has its own advantage of bringing that stress level down when you have been out working whole day or hunting and gathering, and then you come back and you share that meal. So all of that makes a difference. But at least what we can do, not with community, we can at least do share food with family members and sit down and have that meal, have some chat. Take, even if it is 10-15 minutes, take that time away from, even if it is once a week. Okay, if I'm not going to be very unrealistic here. If every day you have, your gadgets in front of you, at least once or twice a week, making sure that you eat that food, it calms you, it calms your nervous system, and that is how it helps that food to be digested.
And so you mentioned, after mentions about microbes is interesting. He didn't know that. Well, your gut biome, we talked about in the last episode, your gut health is
Yeah.
everything. All
Yeah.
the health conditions you have is directly correlated to your gut health. Your gut microbes, which are various types of bacteria and so on, well, they are responsible. Your gut health, I'm talking about your gut microbiome. 70% of your immunity comes from your gut microbiome.
Yeah.
So a lot of people I find blame themselves for eating the wrong foods, being overweight. And I feel this is I don't know how much science has been done on this, but this is my thoughts on it, which is this. If you've been feeding your gut bacteria with unhealthy foods, I don't talk about sugars, processed foods, burgers, and so on, all the manufactured foods that are coming out, if you've been feeding that, it's going to feed the bacteria which does not support your health. And you're going to neglect the bacteria that supports your health. So, for example, if you're filling yourself up with sugar, there's a certain type of bacteria which absolutely love sugar.
Yeah.
So does cancer, by the way, but that's a different conversation. And so the way to, and so people have sugar cravings, thinking, oh, I want sugar. No, no, it's your gut bacteria sending
Yep.
message to your brain saying, feed me sugar. And so as a result, you have food cravings, but you end up blaming yourself. But it's the enemy within.
Food cravings are imbalance of your gut, Harun.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whenever you're having any kind of craving, whether it's in pregnancy or non-pregnancy, they come from imbalance. Okay. And you, because your gut is not balanced, because your hormones are not balanced, you are not eating a balanced diet,
Mm,
that is when you start having these cravings. I mean, in
absolutely.
pregnancy with twins, I had no craving whatsoever. None. Didn't crave for any ice cream, didn't crave for any lemon, didn't crave for, because it is coming from, and as you mentioned, all these bacteria which are asking for sugar, what they really want is they want good energy food. But because
Mm.
we are not giving that to them, they get satisfied with whatever sugar you are giving it to them. And then they ask for more. That's where the craving comes from.
So some people might say we'll do an entire episode again. There's so many things we're going to do entire episodes on. One thing to keep in mind: there's a number of things that
On
affect,
cravings.
and on cravings alone, there's a number of things that affect your gut biome.
Yeah.
Number one, obviously, the food that you eat. Number two, immune system, 70% from the gut biome. Keep that in mind. Number two, if you have antibiotics basically is antibacterial, it destroys your
Yeah.
gut biomes. This is why most people get constipation after being on a series of antibiotics. The third thing to keep in mind is when you're born, if you have a cesarean section, then you will miss out all the microbiome that your mother has in the vaginal canal. All of that, if it's a natural birth, you will pick that up as well. So that has a significant impact on your immune health and overall health. So this again an entire separate episode of many episodes. How do you fix uh, quick one? How do you fix your gut biome? Eat fermented foods,
Mm.
sauerkraut, kimchi, but you want the ones that are from the fridge. basically pickled foods.
Yeah.
There's a whole fibrous foods. So you want to have very often fibrous foods are the ones that most people don't like. So you want
Yeah.
broccoli, you want kale. All of these foods will help you improve your gut bacteria, and it takes a little while. But let's say if somebody I make my own kimchi. It's actually very easy. It's fun and it's gorgeous. Aftab, you will love it. John, you would love it. I don't know why I'm pointing to my different computers, but you guys would love it. Sauerkraut, actually, you can make it at home. It's so easy.
Yeah.
If I was on medication, and I won't be, but if somebody of my family was on medication, then one thing I would do is make sure they've got probiotics. I prefer not to use kefir on the I
Yeah.
do use it occasionally simply because of the dairy. It has an inflammatory effect. So that's a quick overview of how to fix your gut biome. Now, again, after please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and or if you're watching on LinkedIn, I think you are, then just keep an eye out every Monday. We're going to cover gut bacteria very soon. Moving on to the third element of obesity, calorie deficit. Now, I watch a lot of videos. I do a lot of research on the science that's kimchi, brilliant. Okay, this I'm just reading after I'm saying he has kimchi, have loads of it. So I watch a lot of science. I read it. I research a paper. I work in medical field, and there's a lot of people make a lot of controversy around the whole thing about weight loss at the very fundamental level.
Mhm.
What goes in, if it equals what goes out, you maintain the same weight.
Yeah.
The question, and there's a bit of caveats here. If you what you eat, the energy you put in, if you put in more energy than you put out, you're gonna gain weight.
Yeah.
Very, very simple. If you put energy in and you use more energy, you're gonna lose weight. That's a very simple, basic principle. However, there's little caveats like it's not what you are what you eat, but it's what you absorb. So if your guts has been screwed up by really crappy foods or drugs or the environment, there's environmental toxins, there may be toxins in your house, there might be mold, etc. If it's been screwed
Yeah.
over, then you're not going to be able to absorb food so well. As an example, magnesium is a mineral which is required in over 300 and something odd chemical reactions,
Mm.
extremely important. Um, but a lot of people take magnesium tablets, and that's great if you can absorb the constituents you're eating. What I prefer is magnesium oil spray, which spray onto whatever area, and then you absorb it directly through your skin into your
Mm.
bloodstream. So you have to be mindful about that. Is there anything you want to say about calorie in and calorie out? Again, what can people do naturally without, stressing themselves in their calorie intake and expression of it?
Well, again, it goes back to the constitution. You need to know your body. Okay. So if you are a person who knows that you have more kapha in you and there is more tendency to put on weight, then you need to make sure that there is more calorie output for you to lose weight if you are trying to lose weight, or to maintain there has to be more calorie deficit. But it is personal to everyone. There are people who may not be able to exercise because of whatever reason. They have injuries, or they are bedbound, or they have other health issues like bad knees, and they cannot exercise or cannot go for walk. There are a lot of other things one can train themselves to do. You can do upper body exercise. You can do swimming. It is about learning how your body operates. Yeah, how your digestion is. Are you somebody, whatever you eat, you are able to digest that food, and you have good stools? You are going to get calorie deficit that way. However, I think if you are someone who where you cannot exercise, or for whatever reason you don't like exercising that much, then you will have to monitor what you're eating. There is no two ways about it. Yeah. um, for some people, of course, they say that, oh, I only eat very little and I still get more obese. That is because there is still some inherent imbalance in it. It's not
Mm.
because of this principle is the same for everyone. But in some people, it does not look that way because they already have some issue. Maybe thyroid is not functioning well. Now, why thyroid is not functioning well? because there is an issue, there is an imbalance, or there may be hormonal imbalance, or there may be high cortisol, because of which they are putting on more weight. They don't eat that much, but they're still putting on weight. Women who are perimenopausal women, they put on more weight because of the hormonal imbalance. So we need to know which state you are in. But this principle is a good principle. What you eat and what is going out as an exercise, what is your energy expenditure. We have to keep an eye on what you eat, right? For example, I can only give my example, that through the day, if I know that I'm going to have tonight a good dinner, or I'm going out for the dinner, then I will accordingly eat less through the day. Yeah. So that you are balancing it. And this is only, you can monitor it, you can write it down, but it is more of a mental maths. And if you keep doing that, it will have a compound effect, that it becomes a habit. So that is where then other thing is habits come into place.
And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But one of the things to keep in mind is exactly what you've just said, Ashish, which is this. So my friend, after I know he's been doing football, he cycles, he says he's maintained the same weight for the last 30 years. And, I mean, he's active guy. I mean, can't imagine. I think it's probably pitta stroke kapha, sorry, vata kind of constitution. I'm not sure, but he doesn't look kapha to me. So one thing to keep in mind is this: if you are somebody who's sedentary, one of the biggest reasons kapha people don't change is it's like if you hesitate, you procrastinate, you deliberate in doing exercise. You have not linked it powerfully enough to how it impacts on every other area of life. So, for example, you haven't given a reason to deserve good health. And it links in to the next one we'll come into in a minute about self-image. So, for example, if you take somebody who is unhealthy and overweight and obese, and you ask them, why do you deserve to be physically fit and healthy? They'll come up with maybe one or two reasons, but not many. If you go to somebody like who has a constitution of, they're very healthy, basically. Okay. Yeah. If you ask them, they're sporting, etc. So if you ask him, why do you deserve to have a healthy body? Well, I can fundraise for my cause. I can be a better leader. I can think more clearly. I can make a difference, to be an inspiration to my kids. There'll be a whole list of stuff. So if you are overweight, you got to ask yourself, why do I deserve to be healthy? Link it to, watch this, link it to your creativity, your genius, your brain health, your mind. Link it to your significant relationships, be it your parents, be it your husband, wife, your spouse, your children, people who are significant in your life. Link your health to your career. How is that affecting your career in a positive and negative way? Be aware of the negatives as well. Link it to money. What's it costing you not being healthy? Link it to money. What are the benefits of you being healthy? Will it help you to create a better income? Link it to your spirit, your spirituality. A lot of spiritual systems, religions involve moving, praying, bending down, prostrating, and so on. So connect, and the more reasons you have, for which is connected to all of these, the more self-motivated you're going to be. So moving to that, the fourth strategy. So the previous one was calorie deficit, have a calorie deficit nor a calorie surplus. Fourth one, and obviously there's a bit more nuances to that. The fourth one is about self-image. What are your thoughts on self-image and people who are obese or overweight?
Yes, this is a big topic which is linked to how your mindset is about yourself. Your self-belief comes into that. Your confidence comes into that. How you were raised comes into that. As in how your formative years were and how you were treated in those formative years has a huge impact on your self-image. and your confidence. And that also we know is linked to diseases, especially obesity, because it is linked to habits. When you don't love yourself, you don't care for yourself. It's like, okay, it doesn't matter if I'm big, this is how I am. You become blasé about it. But if somebody else, if you had that love, it also, I think, but what we were talking about earlier, it does come back to this idea of self love. If you were not loved by your parents or people around you, or at least you didn't feel it that way, right? Put it that way. Your parents think they loved you enough, but you didn't feel that love. And that is going to come to the point where you don't have that self love anymore because you were not fulfilled as a child. Yeah, all a child needs is food and love, I think. And even food is form of love. And then we have this lack, that because you lack that love, you lack that self love, you lack that self respect, it then comes back as this idea that doesn't matter how I look, doesn't matter how I appear, doesn't matter how my health is, nobody cares for me, right? So that's where the link is. And this is a mental health issue. This is an issue which goes way deeper in people's psychology than they actually can recognize. But
Mm.
anybody who has got obesity issue, or also has got issue where they cannot lose weight, or that they keep putting back on that weight, they lose and put it back on, they keep eating those foods which they know they're not good for them. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that this food is actually not good for me and I'm going to put on more weight, but they still do it because it is more of a mental health issue. It's how your psychology works. So I think that's something one has to do more inner, deeper work on themselves. Self love. Until you're going to love yourself, you're not going to care for yourself.
Well, this is so important. In fact, a extended family member has an obesity issue, and I see the self-loathing in the form of having low self-esteem across all life. But there's several ways to express it. One is to be blatantly, you look like somebody who, I'm not talking about size, I'm just, your behaviors are very introverted and you hide it. The other is, and I see this a lot, especially with social media, people over expressing it. So in other words, I'm ashamed of my physical physique, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to overeat, and I'm going to show the world that I don't care. But the truth
Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
truth, and our body is a temple, not an ancient ruin, and everybody knows that intuitively. One of the issues is, I know you're laughing at the ancient ruin bit. One of the issues that we must be aware of is the whole thing about fat shaming. It's important to understand this. Fat shaming happens not just externally, but internally. Here's what happens. You have your fat cells in your body, everybody has that, has a satiating hormone called leptin.
Mm.
Leptin is a hormone which tells your brain, so it releases from the fat, goes to the brain, tells your brain that, hey, belly's full. It's
Yeah.
okay. You don't need to eat anymore. This is why, someone who's got normal leptin production, they tend not to get overly fat or overweight. And
Yeah.
so the problem is this: the more fat cells you have, the more production of leptin there is. At some point, the brain goes, yo, stop. It doesn't say, yo, stop. It just, kind of says, I'm not going to believe you. It starts ignoring the
Yeah.
communication. So that's called leptin resistance. So whilst ghrelin, Grelin, ghrelin is responsible for telling you you're hungry,
Yeah.
leptin is telling you you're full. But for people who are gaining more and more weight,
Yeah.
even with a big belly full of food, it still feels like you are hungry. And so often people will fat shame, and they're going to be ashamed themselves, which is one of the worst emotions to feel. And as a result, it reinforces the
Yeah.
behavior. The problem is this: willpower itself is not going to get rid of this problem. Willpower is basically saying, my brain is going to take over this overeating. Well, it doesn't work because your brain is telling you, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
So it's not about willpower, it's about discipline and self discipline, which brings us onto habits. What are the
Mm.
core habits that we might want to consider um, Dr. Ashish. For those of you who don't know who Dr. Ashish is, by the way, if you don't know who this is Dr. Ashish Paul. My name is Harun Rabbani. You are watching the Harun Rabbani podcast,
In
and
the
we are
end,
going to
we
be.
introduce ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to be launching. This is my podcast platform. But in a few months' time, I don't know when exactly, we're going to be launching a separate podcast. We'll talk about that later. So, talk to us about habits. What kind of habits should we be looking into that can help people with reducing or reversing obesity and weight?
Yeah, yeah. I have one favorite one, really, really basic and favorite one is that from whatever your weight is, whatever your size is, you're trying to reduce, is to cut down your dinner meal, evening meal, dinner meal, whatever time that is for you, just stop eating that. And that is going to be forever. It's not a short term strategy. Short term strategy just does not work. So please don't fool yourself with any short term strategies. It's a long term strategy which will give you result depending on how much is your weight. But we are looking at a year at least, and then another year to sustain that, for longer term.
Hmm.
So that is one. That's my favorite one. I always say if you want to maintain your weight, no dinners. Yeah. Or reduce your dinner to something like a dal soup, which is more protein based food. If you get really, really hungry in the beginning, then you can have that, maybe tofu, maybe beans, some kind of protein food that you can have, which is lean, which keeps you lean and does not add carbohydrate.
Hmm.
Um, so that is one, my favorite one. Second is consistent habit of you have to monitor what you are eating, breakfast and lunch. So you're not having any dinner. So breakfast and lunch, you can have one meal you can have to your heart's desire, whatever that is. If it's breakfast or if it is lunch, you can have either one of those good ones. And the other one you have to monitor. If it is one slice of bread or one piece of you are having or one egg, you got to eat that consistently for months and months on end. It's about consistent habit every single day. And you can mix and match with in terms of calories. You can look at calories, for example, how much is one egg equivalent to if you were eating something else, or avocado, or the beans that you were eating. Uh, but that is one of my favorite consistent habit for people to have.
So one of the things about habits I really want to emphasize here, the whole thing about forming a habit in 21 days is absolute BS. I tell you what, it's based on, I think it was the 1950s or something. A book was written by a plastic surgeon. Here's what he found. He used to deal with people who lost limbs, who had replacement of arms and legs. And what he found was it took 21 days on average for them to get used to the new limb.
Right.
From that, he concluded that's how long it takes to form a new habit. And so what happened was that 21-day myth was taught by people like Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, which is his mentor, all the big names. Without even doing the research, they've been propagating it, promoting it for
Yeah.
several decades, and now everyone believes 21-day habits. And it's embarrassing. Even some friends of mine actually promote it. There's only so much I can say, right? Um, and I think, oh my God, what a lot of nonsense. Because here's
Yeah.
what happens. You want to form a habit. You're giving yourself 21 days. You've done it consistently, and then day 25, you go, oh my God, you're back to square one. You know what that does? It lowers your self worth, your self esteem, your confidence in
Yeah.
yourself, your self belief. According to University College London, who did a quite extensive study with Philip Alali, who's the lead psychologist, they found across several habits, it takes on average 66 days to form a new habit. That's more than 2 months,
Yeah.
66 days of consistent practice, whatever the new practice is. And so if you think you're going to lose weight or you're going to meditate or you're going to be running and getting fit,
Anything.
etc., it ain't going to happen. And in fact, some habits take longer to form. And so
Take
Ashish
it.
is 100% correct that go for a year. If it's something that's of meaning, and I told you how to make it more meaningful to you, make it show here. One of the habits that I strongly emphasize is sleep. Oh my goodness. Ashish,
Yeah.
what happens when, I mean, what happens when someone isn't sleeping properly from a medical stance?
Oh, well, in Ayurveda, we have three pillars of Ayurveda. Yeah. One is food, other one is sleep, and third one is what we call brahmacharya, non-indulgence. So you can see how important sleep is from natural medicine point of view, from Ayurvedic point of view. And we know this neuroscience is proving this more and more and more and more, is that sleep is a reset for your whole body mind system. Yeah. So in that reset, you are whatever needs to be reduced gets reduced, whatever needs to be pumped up gets pumped up. Your body needs that rest, and it needs that rest at a particular time. It is not about, okay, I will work through the night and then I sleep during the day. Day sleep is far worse for your body system as compared to night sleep. So it has to be night sleep at a particular time. 10 o'clock is the latest time when you should be asleep by 10 o'clock. So sleep is linked to everything, your sugar levels, it's linked to your hormones, it is linked to your fertility, it is linked to your other, diabetes, for example. It is
Yeah.
linked to every single system of our body. So sleep is crucial habit, and it is a habit where you should be sleeping consistently again, right? Consistent habit, sleeping on time at a particular time.
So a lot of people say, "Oh my God, I'm a night owl. How am I going to do this?" Here's what I found. And again, the science shows it out. And you must listen to the Andrew Huberman show about sleep because he goes on about it. Brilliant, one of my favorite
Yeah,
neuroscientists ever. And so, brilliant trick of the trade for sleeping is this: wake up early, wake up at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and
yeah,
and then, like a drunkard, go to your front door or back door, wherever the sun is shining. Don't look straight at the sun, look towards it. The sunlight, first thing in the morning, that sunlight, we have sensory nerves in our eyes, which actually activates the production of melatonin, the sleep hormone,
that's
which
right.
gets released 16 hours later. So if you, and I do this, I wake up early
Yeah.
and I'm struggling to watch late night movies because I'm starting to sound like my old uncle. He's passed away, which is, he used to halfway through a movie, not even halfway, 10 minutes in the movie, he'll snore. And I was like the other day, just sat there on my couch watching a movie, really good movie, but I'm like having trouble keep my head, straight. And it's either because I'm getting old, which could be true, or the fact that I woke up so early and it activates your
Yeah.
melatonin. But the trick is you mustn't sleep in the middle of the day. If you
No.
sleep in the middle of the day, then it kind of destroys the objective of the exercise. So wake up early, and if you're
Yeah.
having problems sleeping, stop the coffee, stop the smoking.
Well,
Go
that
ahead.
we, I mean, that's why we used to have Surya Namaskar first thing in the morning, is
Yeah.
that you praise the sun. One of the benefits is to get the sunlight right in, not directly, as you said, not from the sun, but to look at the light away from the actual sun, but to look at that bright light and to get the melatonin. Melatonin has got amazing benefits.
Mm.
The natural production of melatonin is linked to, again, a lot of other things, such as fertility, such as your hormone production, such as the balance of sugar. So it is crucial to have consistent habit. The word is consistent, to have the same habit every day of eating, sleeping, passing stools, eating food
Yeah.
on time. Yeah.
And again, another episode will just do that on passing stools. It's actually that important. So we're coming. She doesn't want to do it. We'll do it. Trust me, we have to do it because there's an
Yes,
entire side.
I like that, because so many people don't, you and I know so many people don't pass stools very well. So
No. So that episode we're going to talk shit basically. So anyway, Ashish, her focus, her client work is primarily with people. I mean, she's an Ayurvedic doctor, all round holistic doctor, basically providing alternative medicine, natural herbal remedies, etc., for those people with various issues. But her specialty is fertility. Do you want to just say a quick couple of lines about how infertility is related to obesity, please?
Oh, absolutely. It is related to sperm's health. It is related to PCOS. It is related to the functioning of the fallopian tubes. It is related to the overall blood flow that you have to the pelvic area, and because of which you might be hampering the flow of sperms and the egg from the tubes. So it is linked, and obesity is also linked directly to your hormones. So, absolutely, it is tied in like that. So if you're obese, your fertility will be affected.
And there's so many other habits I want to share, but we just haven't got time. Intermittent fasting, sauna, lots of other stuff we want to share.
Yeah.
And in terms of the work that
Another
I do,
episode, another
yeah,
episode.
we've got loads of episodes. We've got this year and the next 20 years sorted out now, weekly episodes. So, um, and for diabetes, of course, I already touched upon it. Insulin resistance. Everybody who's obese has, if you're overweight, then you are heading towards insulin resistance territory. Insulin
Yeah.
resistance is related to type 2 diabetes and what is now becoming fast known as type 3 diabetes, Alzheimer's. By the time you get
Mm.
diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, it's actually too late, but it
Yeah.
takes usually about 10, 20 years for it to develop. That comes from insulin resistance caused by sugar, but also if you've got obesity, there's that chance. So you must work on it. I hope this is enough of a negative for you to go, yeah, the negative motivation is going to get me up and running. So also, everybody who's got type 2 diabetes, they've got insulin resistance, they've got chronic inflammation,
Yeah.
they've got chronic stress. We've covered that. They've got oxidative stress, which is basically meaning that there's more free radicals in their body. We did cover that indirectly. We talked about foods. And they've got leptin resistance. So if you've got obesity or heading that direction, you've got all the 5 characteristic traits to lead you into type 2 diabetes, and you really don't want to go there because the consequences are quite dire. If you do get there, if you are there, then drop me a line. If you have got infertility issues, then drop Ashish a line. Usual social media channels.
Yeah.
Is there any final note you want to share? And by the way, for those of you who are asking questions right now, we covered about concentration. One more question I want to take actually. How does somebody, John asks, how do we find out our body type? How do we do that? Is there a particular
Yes.
test?
On my website, there is a questionnaire that anybody can fill and find out what their body type is. It comes directly to me, so whenever you will fill and do that. But there are other online. If you look for dosha questionnaire or dosha types or body type, Ayurvedic body type, you will find it.
Brilliant. Okay, so we will put a link in the notes later on Facebook, LinkedIn, and
Yeah,
YouTube,
we can do
and
that.
also and our show notes how to find your dosha body type. Do take your time. It takes time to absorb this information, and
Yeah.
when you start absorbing, you'll find that the way you treat your body will be a lot more respectful, self-respecting, self-loving, and self-honoring. So, Ashish, thank you very much once again. Next week, live again, another episode. And I can't remember from the top of my head what it is. I'm sure it's immune health or something. Anyway, thank you, Ashish. See you all next time. Bye for now.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Harun.